Hello, and a big welcome to our webinar today for the University of Miami Online. And today we're going to talk about sports branding in the age of social media. It's not good enough now just to wear your jersey with pride with your name on the back. There's a lot more going on in the digital space in terms of how sports brands and sports individuals are trying to communicate with their fans and how they're trying to generate leads for tickets and sell more jerseys and create more excitement and a larger base of fans for their sports teams. And that's what we're going to discuss today, as well as our fantastic sports administration program that we have at University of Miami Online. I've got a wonderful panel today, and I'd just like to welcome our panel for today. Can we go around the room first? Can we introduce ourselves today one by one? Thank you.
Hi, Taiwan Martin, assistant professor, University of Miami. Background is in media. I examine media messages and how they impact consumer behavior. And I also focus second strand of research. I look at branding and its impact on branding and its impact on consumers as well. So happy to be here. Glad to share whatever knowledge I have, and looking forward to this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Taiwan. And continue.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Wendy Dees. I'm an associate professor here at the U in sport administration. I'm also the graduate program director, so I'm your go-to person for questions about the program, so feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions after the webinar or just any questions in general about the program. My research area is in primarily in corporate sponsorship and event marketing. But a lot of what I look at with sponsorship is how they brand themselves through the integrated communications platform of sport. So I'm really excited for this topic. It's something that I research, and it's near and dear to my heart. So welcome to everyone joining us, and glad to be here.
All right, and I'm Paul Resnick, senior lecturer in the sport admin department, and my specialty is really the internships and professional development and personal branding. And really getting you ready for that step after you walk out and land those high-quality positions within the industry. Established connections over the last 8+ years here in trying to help you guys land those ideal jobs out there. So.
Perfect. And thank you very much, guys. My name's Joe. I'm an MBA student, and I'm a moderator for today. I am a sports obsessive, and I'm sure you can tell by my accent that I am from the United Kingdom. So it's going to be difficult for me to differentiate between football, which we call soccer, and American football for you guys. But I am a fantasy football obsessive, so I'm crossing my fingers for all my players coming into the weekend. And it's fantastic that we're doing this webinar off the back of a fantastic performance recently by the Miami Hurricanes. We're going to get into that. And the Miami Hurricanes are really steamrolling teams at the moment, and that really helps us with our branding as well. It's always good to be winning, right, guys? So we asked you some questions about sports branding in the age of social media, and thank you very much for looking into those questions for us. For our audience today, you have an opportunity to send your questions into us and into the professors, and we can answer any questions that you like upon the subject matter today, sports branding in the age of social media, as well as any questions that you have about the course, the structure of that course, what it's like to learn online, and anything you might want to know about the application process itself. So that Q&A is going to be coming up in about 45 minutes, so you'll get what you put into this webinar, you'll get out of it. So please listen attentively and ask your questions, and we look forward to getting to them in about 45 minutes. So let's start with our questions for today. I'm going to go around the room and I'll start with you, Taiwan. Taiwan, what do you really feel nowadays are the key components for modern sports branding?
Yeah, this is sounds like I'm just in class right now as we just wrap this up, talking about this the other day. One of the things that I frequently tell students, especially obviously about brands, is tell people who you are. Who are you? What you do well, and be consistent. Consistency is certainly important. And one of the things that I frequently talk about is a company's or organization's mission statement should lead what the organization is doing, regardless of the platform in which they're communicating with constituents. Is that it should, whatever a company do, whatever an organization does with its brand, It should be consistent across the board, and that consistency should reflect on what the organization's mission statement is. One of the things I throw out to students is, and I ask them, and I usually get laughs after this, is I ask students, given that we're an Adidas school, how many of you have ever had an Adidas burger, right? And most people look at me and laugh and roll their eyes when I throw that out there, and I ask that for a specific reason. Adidas doesn't do burgers, right? They do athletic apparel, right? And they're consistent with they're consistent in terms of what they do, and they don't deviate from that idea. So if you've had an Adidas burger, tell me about it. But I'm telling you, it's not out there. It doesn't exist. That's not their business. Their business is sport apparel, and they do a fantastic job at that. So who you are, what the organization, what the brand is, what you do well, and be consistent. Consistency throughout whatever you do, and specifically in communicating with constituents and getting your message across as it relates to your brand.
I mean, that's interesting, Ty, because I mean, the principles there for modern sports branding are similar principles that we're taught in business on our business courses. You know, if we look at Apple and think of Apple, we think of usability, plug and play, integrated systems all within one developer framework, and that's what the brand means to us. You can pick up a phone and it integrates with your video, integrates with your email, integrates with your music. Is that a similar ethos that sports brands can also take?
Go ahead.
Yeah, as far as I'm trying to think. In fact, when we were researching this or talking about this the other day, especially what Adidas is doing, all the Adidas schools, what Adidas has done, it's very similar in terms of the look, the feel, right? Now, certainly colors may be different, and obviously universities' names and so on and so forth. But as far as what they do, the look, the appearance, the feel, it's all very much the same, and it's recognizable. And I think that that's important, because if it's what happens is that when you become inconsistent, then your brand gets lost in the competitive marketplace, and that is no good for the overall reputation of a brand. So it doesn't matter it doesn't matter the platform, what you do. It must stay consistent throughout. And again, tell people who you are, what you do well, and things along those lines. So you should see that across the board for really effective brands, and Adidas is one of them.
And to tack on to that, Joe, with what Ty's saying with Adidas, I just used them as a case study in my class a couple of chapters ago on branding. And I think what Dr. Martin mentioned, a couple of things are very important there. He talked about not having your message get lost. He talked about what we call in the industry of always staying on brand with your consistency. And if we're going to talk about modern sports branding and kind of a very unique strategy, the case study that I went over with my class on Adidas, if you're following them outside of the college sports space, if you're not, you should be. Adidas is a great example of a company that is going through what I call, kind of a brand renaissance. 10, 15 years ago, I would argue that people were not wearing Adidas much anymore. Nike was dominating the landscape. Adidas was not considered cool. I told my students, you have to think about this. This is pre-Kanye. This is pre-Yeezys. This was pre-Adidas having the cool factor that it has right now. But if you're following what they're doing branding and business-wise, here's how they got to where they are. The last 2 years, they created a 6-city marketing strategy. So they
Wow.
decided the way that they were going to climb back branding-wise, to go back to Dr. Martin's point, was to go back to their roots and what their brand represented to people, and it was sports and fashion. That's where Adidas has always had their success. So they created a 6 global city strategy where they were going to focus on penetrating and dominating those 6 cities, bringing sports and fashion back to prominence.
Wow.
And they knew that those 6 cities, the 6 cities that they selected, were all ones that had very prominent sports teams and are considered like fashion meccas. And they knew that once they kind of owned those 6 cities, that the trickle-down effect across the world globally in all the major markets, that those 6 cities would influence how people consumed Adidas throughout the world. And if you look at the last 2 years since they launched that strategy, in 2016, if you go to Interbrand's website, Interbrand is a marketing agency that ranks the top 100 global brands every year. Adidas is in the top 100 every year of global brands. In 2016 and 2017, both years, they were labeled as one of the top growth brands. And in terms of their market share, their sales, and everything across the board, they're making huge strides. So now you can see that 6-prong or 6-city global strategy starting to work for them. And it's also kind of, there's some coincidence there that Nike is one of the biggest one of the biggest brands to have dropped in that same amount of time. So their branding strategy, their marketing strategy, their sales strategy are all integrated, and it's been a very specific effort to do that. It hasn't just happened coincidentally. So they've been very shrewd with their branding strategies, and they're a company to watch.
I mean, I totally agree. I mean, it's different. There's a bit of a difference as well between America and the rest of the world, the ROW, because obviously in Europe, you know, Adidas are still big, a massive presence, especially in Germany. You know, I'm from Amsterdam; they're headquartered here, so I think we see them a lot more over here. I think you hit the nail on the head. If you look at like the Yeezys or you look at the Y3s, they're not just sports garments; they're fashion items. And beyond the Jordans and the Air Force Ones, I don't think Nike have managed to capitalize as being a fashion brand. There's still a large amount of utility to the Nike brand, where Adidas has the utility, but they also seem to sneak quite cleverly into fashion. But that is very divisive, and it does answer this question in terms of how do sports brands leverage their identity for competitive advantage. One thing I found interesting, guys, is doing my research is how do you merge a brand identity from a sponsor with a brand identity from a university or a team? Because Miami has its own identity, but then Adidas football has its own identity in terms of its aesthetic, like Dr. Martin was talking about earlier, the way the images come in, the sound, that kind of huge, punchy, hype train marketing. How does that fit into how Miami want to market themselves? Or do you have to kind of fall in line to how Adidas markets themselves? Or is it a conversation?
Well, I think I don't want to go too much into sponsorship because I know that's later on.
That is coming up. That is coming up.
But just for this specific example, I think that's a great question, because if you would have asked everyone on campus and in the Miami Hurricanes community when we switched from Nike to Adidas, the initial response was of overwhelming disappointment. The U had always been a Nike school, and everyone was so entrenched in the Nike brand that the U and the Nike brand were almost synonymous.
Yes.
And so that was very difficult for everyone. But I think long term, when you take a look at the brand associations for Miami and the brand associations for Adidas, I think they're much more similar. You know, Adidas is seen as a fashion brand. It's seen as being very on trend. It's seen as being very cutting edge. They're always willing to kind of push the boundaries. And if you think about the U brand, that really fits better for us. I mean, we're in a big metropolitan city. We're very diverse. It's a fashion mecca. And the U, if you think about everything our coaches have done in the past and kind of how we came to be known as the U, it was because Jimmy Johnson pushed the boundaries to the point where he and the president didn't get along very well. So that's where the U, originated. It originated from pushing boundaries. It originated from, being on top and wanting that exposure, and just crossing over from sports to fashion to entertainment. So I think those two brands actually fit very well. It was just a matter of getting everyone to, realize that, we didn't have to be a Nike school forever, especially if Adidas was the better fit.
Yeah, and just to kind of jump on that, I think what Adidas did, which was really kind of smart, we brought Mark Rick back to head up our football program, and then all of a sudden we kind of had this whole like back to the U kind of style and feel. What did Adidas do? Well, they had some uniforms that first came out for the football team that was kind of this new look, and then they latched on to this retro kind of style, and then they released a new set of uniforms that was all back from our 80s kind of look and style, and I think that really brought them on the map here. Not to say that our fans forgot about the Nike brand, but then they were entrenched with, oh, okay, Adidas, this is the cool gear, it's the U swagger, the whole attitude came back. Players, so it ended up being kind of a perfect storm with the Adidas brand, and although Nike, we were the first university out of all college programs to have an apparel deal with all of our sports. This is going back, 20 plus years ago, and that was Nike. We were the kind of the benchmark for that. So to have a university tied to an apparel brand for such a long period of time, and then having a new company come in, sign an apparel deal with us, and it just worked out really well. I mean, with the whole retro look, and now the great thing is, I'm sure these guys can attest to it, you walk around the stadium, and yeah, you see some little pockets of Nike stuff, but this Adidas gear is really jumping on board. People are loving that retro style look. Even some of the older folks that instead of them digging into their closets from 20, 30 years ago, now they're out and they're able to buy some of this new Adidas gear, where Nike, they didn't latch on to that. They just kept on trying to reinvent kind of the look, the design, kind of moving forward where Adidas went back, and
I was going to say, even with Nike tried to create their own. We had our own separate logo with Nike, and again, if you know the marketplace, right, consistency across the board. The thing here is, piggybacking off of what Paul said, is that, and I know we're going to talk about the U and the brand and what it represents, but we marry cool, right? We marry the cool brand of the University of Miami with the cool brand of Adidas, and especially when you're talking about the tradition of this university and its success as it relates to football, and then Adidas and what it's done in its recent campaign, it's tying in the cool. And in Miami, cool is king. It has to be cool.
Cool is cachet.
You will lose in this, and you will lose in this space, in this city, as far as your sport organization goes. It has to be cool, and both the brand of Adidas and the University of Miami brand marry together. They marry cool together.
I think that's absolutely spot on. I mean, if it's very fashion forward, the garments so you want to be seen out wearing the jersey, not just the game. It's that extra utility that's quite special. I mean, if we look at the image now, this image is quite bold. We're using a cutaway of a guy coming in on the screen. We've got juiced written in big letters, big bold marketing, big fluorescent and green Pantones and colors. It's quite in your face. It's quite energetic, and I think that quite fits into the Adidas football model. Let's have a look at what some of the big brands and big examples are out there in the industry at the moment. Can you each give a good example of a sports brand with a strong identity? I mean, I've picked what I feel is the strongest brand identity here, number 23, Michael Jordan. But can you each give us an example of a sports brand that you might appreciate?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in this because I'm gonna go right to Forbes, top list of kind of most successful franchises out there, and right up at the top of the list, above Real Madrid, above Barcelona, the Dallas Cowboys, America's team. I mean, they've taken that star, and this is no offense to Ty, who may talk about the Green Bay Packers here, and I'm not a Cowboys fan, but if you look at that, yeah, they built a tradition, 70s, into the 80s, into the 90s, and kind of moving forward. And this star itself, and just to give you a fact and figure here as far as what we're looking at numbers-wise, they're valued at $4.2 billion. You know, so
What?
that is just well beyond team performance. And this is a team that hasn't won a championship in a number of years. They dominated in the 90s. It's been a while since they've won a championship, and yet the strength of this brand is incredible. You know, you see a star anywhere in this country, if you're a sportsman, you're going to recognize, oh, that's the Dallas Cowboys, that's America's team. Where you see that blue and that silver, or even just Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones is identified as you know, Dallas Cowboys football. So, you know, that's one really strong brand, at least from a team side of things, that the numbers can't go wrong here. I mean, you're looking at Forbes' list, and that's number one on that list. And you go down, and there's a series of teams that really fit that.
But,
So,
I think it's a great example, Paul. I mean, even if you take individuals, look at Romo and the work he's doing, calling games for CBS, and how now his brand has evolved now, and he's a media icon, doing really, really well with some great reviews of his performance. I mean, he's managed to kind of parlay that into a career off the back of being, you know, the spokesman for America's team.
absolutely.
I'm going to stay home here. Not the U, but at least talk about what the Miami Marlins have done in recent years, even with their whole rebranding process of a couple of years ago, and the detail in which they took into developing or rebranding that brand into what it is today. I mean, if you looked even at the color scheme, right? They're so detailed in their color scheme that each color has its own unique name that's specific to the city of Miami. So the black, as an example, in the color palette is considered, or they call it nightclub black, right? That is very much Miami. You're not going to find that. You're not going to find that anywhere else.
And Dr. Martin is wearing nightclub black right now.
Dr. Martin's wearing nightclub black. I think I'm wearing a kind of aquamarine that might represent the Marlin. Marlin teal.
Mine's funeral black. So I'm not doing the Miami cool thing very well, but Dr. Martin's
We're not talking about the Cleveland Browns today, though. So sorry for any fans of the team.
We won't talk about what color brown that is either.
No, and even the transition from Florida Marlins to the Miami Marlins. I mean, they took the Miami, the city, is a brand. Right? It's a brand. And I know I mentioned this, but I know we're gonna talk about University of Miami, but there's a reason why we're not Coral Gables University, right? I mean, the city of Miami. When you say Miami, or when most people say Miami, the thoughts that they tend to evoke as a result of saying that name means various things for a lot of people: excitement, fun, South Beach, entertainment,
spring break.
Right? I mean, all of that is in that name, and I'm sure I'm leaving out a bunch of attributes, but certainly that right there is I'm sure part of the reasons why the Marlins decided to go from Florida to Miami, because Florida could mean anything. You know, Florida could mean Gainesville, Tallahassee. It could mean anything. But when you say Miami, Miami has a special ring, sound, and tone to it, and as well as a feel. And so I'm confident that that's part of the reason why they decided to go that direction in terms of their branding. So that's my example as far as a brand and its strong identity and the things that they've done to strengthen that identity in the marketplace.
Exactly.
And
Wendy, do you have an example?
I think we would be remiss if we were talking about brands with strong identities and we just stayed in the team space. So yeah. I want to bring up the individual athlete space because we're at such an amazing time to look at how individual athletes can now create their own brands in the way that only teams could do that before because they have all the social and digital platforms. and they can absolutely create their own brand and their own exposure, and they can control that 100% themselves. Not to say that they don't have PR agents and have help, but some of the ones who control their own brand do the best job. And so there are a plethora of examples. I was a college tennis player, so you know, I think brands like Serena Williams and the Maria Sharapovas and the Roger Federers, I think if you look at the sport of tennis, those athletes dominate the headlines, not just with their performance, but they've been so smart about how they are driving their brands off the court. Now, I picked 3 people who are still playing and performing late into their career. Most players would be done by now, and they would just be working on their businesses and their branding. But Maria Sharapova and her agent, Max Eisenbud, many years ago, before she was even close to retiring, started to talk about what her brand would mean off the court, which is where her Sugarpova company came from. And that simply derived out of her being someone who loved sweets and loved that particular type of product, even though she couldn't, you know, enjoy that all the time during her playing career. But it was something very authentic. It was something she was passionate about. Her fans knew about it. She's built that brand with Max's help, and they've done a ton through social media to drive that. Serena is her own cottage industry. She and her sister Venus, if we're talking about sport and fashion, you know, have their own lines of clothing. They do so much in the entertainment and fashion industry that they are viewed as much as athletes as they are fashion icons. And so, and you can look at all different sports. I mean, you know, the Olympics are usually just a great case study in how an athlete takes a cross-section of their competitive career and they take the height of their exposure, and if they want to launch brands or businesses, they do it at that time. I mean, do we know who Simone Biles is a month before the Olympics? But now we're going to know her forever after the Olympics. And so that's really, if you want to talk about modern sports branding, it's taking your name and taking your talent and then growing that to an entire portfolio of businesses, of product extensions, of exposure well beyond your moments of success on the field. And I think individual athletes in all sports are great examples of that, because they really have to do it on their own with no team brand to use as a platform.
No, I agree. And in the UK, we're absolutely obsessed with Mo Farah, and we wait for him to cross the line. And every time he goes like this with that big smile on his face, and that's his brand. All he has to do is this. All Usain Bolt has to do is this. And already everything about them and everything you feel about them is already delivered to you in a simple gesture. And but it's built on these amazing and unbelievable sports performances. Like musicians, they do something that's special and different that as a human we latch onto, and that helps them perpetuate their brand as well. On to our next question that we have here. Please bear with me a second. How does social media tie in? How does social media tie into effective branding? And so what we have here is we have the kind of Twitter page for Miami Hurricanes, and I'll go to you on this one, Ty. How really does social media tie into effective branding? What should sports organizations be doing?
I'm glad you have that example up there, and I also, if you were to look at our website here, you take that website and the Twitter page there, they all look the same. And this goes back, and I know I'm kind of repeating what I said earlier. The feel, the look, it's very consistent across the board. The cool thing about social media that we're learning today is that there are few limitations, and that's what makes it so awesome. Limitations to Twitter are if you don't have access to the internet or if you don't have a Twitter account. Those are your limitations. And what we know is that there are far more people that now have access to the internet, and Twitter's free, right? It's free. It's not going to cost you anything. So that is what makes social media so valuable today, is that the potential reach of the platform, say for instance, in this case, when you're talking about Twitter, that reach, it's essentially, it's outside of the two things that I just mentioned, it is essentially limitless, and that is why it's so important. And it's also the reason why we're seeing more and more teams get into the space of live streaming content.
Yep.
Via social platforms. Twitter being one, which I believe last year the NFL had a relationship with Twitter for the Thursday night games where they live stream those games. I don't think that we've scratched the surface on that. I think we're going to see more and more of it. I also argue, and along with some other industry folks, that social media platforms have helped to change the game and even force networks to change how they do business.
Yeah.
ESPN, as an example, for years they just showed us highlights after highlights. Now, if one of the handles I have students or encourage students to follow is the NBA, and to look at how much video content they put up. It's almost impossible to keep up with it, but it's so effective, and they've done such a good job that arguably that has helped, or that forced ESPN to change how it does business in the way of just running highlights, when organizations like the NBA, MLB, NHL are now putting video content up, and folks can now experience or see those highlights on those Twitter handles. It's really changed the game. Video is very, very effective today, and we're seeing more and more of that. And I think that is, and I think that will continue moving forward.
I completely agree now that in terms of companies getting to their consumer, they have to have a massive omni-channel approach. So we even see here, make sure you tune in to 560 WQAM. So we have a hotline there. You can speak to the head football coach, the head basketball coach, the safeties coach. You can get live access to people. And the social media, it gives you an access to people that you never thought you'd normally have. And so it's the ability to kind of reach out and speak, and you feel part of the team. You feel that you're actually affecting change in your beloved sports team. And that's very similar. I mean, I'm a big fantasy football fan, but I'm listening to the NFL podcast all the time. Around the NFL podcast, I've got the league app that I'm going, and the guys who are on the podcast are also writing the articles that are on the application. So everything serves to advertise each other. It's this whole holistic thing where no matter where you go, you end up becoming further and further entrenched with the brand. And there's this element of what we call in marketing stickiness. So the social media has this stickiness where you stay there and you stick there because you're watching little pieces of content, videos, and access to your sports stars. I have Antonio Brown on Instagram, and it's very hard when he pops up live not to go and see what he's doing in training camp, because you feel like you're there with him. And that kind of brings in our next question, really, to look more at the individuals in sports brands. And so I'd like to go to you, Tom, for this one. Our example here being JJ Watt. But how can individuals, Paul, use social media to build their own brand?
It is it's something that I talk to my students about all the time. We're all on it. I mean, not only us, but our students are all on social media, and it's using social media effectively. I mean, I give an example that if you go for a job interview nowadays, you walk out the door, if you're one of those top candidates, what are those people that are interviewing, what are they doing? They're going right onto social media and seeing what you're posting up online. So you always want to have an effective message of the brand, of who you are, what you represent, and what you want to do in your careers, and have that on social media. So for instance, mine, and these guys can definitely agree because they're the same way, you go onto Twitter, the only thing that you're going to see from all of us is sports business content. It's things that we're talking about in the classroom. It's current events related to sport, and that's an extension of our brand of who we are as professors here. So if you're going for a job and you want to work in the sports industry, you can't be up there tweeting about teams that you don't like, and that you hate this person or don't like this person, because then maybe what comes along that day when you apply to that same exact team, and they go onto your Twitter page and then they see, oh wow, look, that's great, they're applying for this job, and then yet 6 months ago they were bashing us. We don't want that image as a sports org, because if we're doing it, as the organization, we're looking into what our employees or potential employees are doing about what to say the folks that are fans of ours aren't doing the same thing. And then as far as a brand itself and the attachment, you're an extension of that brand, of the company you work for. So if I'm working for XYZ company, organization, and I'm sitting up there and I'm blasting them here and there, left and right, and sees that, they're going to say, what's going on here? You know, where's the allegiance to this brand? So I tell students all the time, you got to be really, really careful about what you're posting up on social media, and take a real serious kind of point of view of what you want presented on there.
Exactly.
Think before you type, before you think. And it's not what your parents are going to think when they see it. No, think about your potential employer and your jobs, and then how it's going to affect your pocket, your income, and your career at some point.
Exactly.
So I'm a really big proponent. Hey guys, use social media for the right things. Don't go on there venting about, you know, whatever's happening in your life, or venting about this particular team. Do that with your folks or your friends. Pick up the phone, old school, like we used to do, and do that. Don't put it on social media, because the minute it's out there, as we've seen with professional athletes,
as we're about to see.
Exactly. The minute you post something, boom. We've got Eric Bledsoe just 2 days ago with the Phoenix Suns. I want out of here. You know, something to that effect is what's tweeted. An hour later, the head coach of the Phoenix Suns is fired. A few hours after that, the general manager comes out and says, yeah, you know what, Eric Bledsoe is telling us he was at a hairdresser, wanted out of the hairdresser. We don't believe that. So now he's pulled out of our rotation, our starting lineup, away from our team, and we're moving him.
Unbelievable.
And he pulled the tweet, you know, so, but it's out there the minute you put it up. So I may not be of Eric Bledsoe's status. I don't have X amount of millions of followers, but if I vent about something here at work at the University of Miami, and I blast it on, and then I said, oh, well, like 5 minutes later, let me delete it.
Principles are the same.
That's it. You know, your followers have caught it. It's out there. There's ways for people to find
Can't
it.
take it back.
Yeah, you've got Twitter, you've got Instagram, you've got Snapchat, you've got LinkedIn. There's so many resources.
Yeah.
And
you can't put individual posts on Twitter either.
Brand out there positively, and don't look at it as this is how I'm going to vent my issues. So you got to use it really effectively as a tool that's going to help you at the next level.
But to tack on to that, not to just focus on the negative of social media, there's two sides. So that part is extremely important. I think probably at the undergraduate level, we focus on that a little bit more because they're so active and they're using social media socially. But I think at the graduate level and beyond, in our U Online program with our grad students, I do it with my undergrad students too, but there's also the positive side of what social media can do for you. You need to see those social media accounts and platforms exactly the way an athlete sees them. That's your opportunity to control, to build, to enhance, and to execute whatever personal brand you want. And that page can open up all sorts of doors for you. Social media, you are only limited by your creativity and effort. So if you are wanting to get a job in marketing or finance, or you want to be the next sports agent, or you want to be in operations, or you want to work globally in soccer or the NBA or whatever the case may be, you have an extremely effective, wonderful 24/7 platform to showcase who you are, what you know, what your skill set is, what you're about. And so you can build yourself into an expert in whatever area that you want, and you can showcase that to anyone in the world at any time. So if you use that platform to share what you're reading and what you're studying and show people that you're immersed in that area. If you're putting up pictures instead of things that you're doing socially, but if you're putting up pictures of where you're working or videos of your internship, or you're posting up, you know, case studies that you just worked on in class and your analysis of those, and starting up conversations or reaching out to experts and saying, I'd love to speak to you about this. And setting up informational interviews. You really need to think of your social media as this 24/7 interactive personal website where if you're in our U Online program, it's not a disadvantage that you're not here in Miami. because you have access to us anytime, you have access to our network anytime, you have access to anybody in the sports world in the area that you want to work at any time, and we can help you learn how to leverage your social media such that it's not social, it can be business media.
Business
And
media.
it works for you. You should be building your personal brand exactly the way these athletes and teams are doing it, and that social media should be a networking tool for you, and you should start doing that right now.
Yeah,
No, I totally agree. I mean, even continue.
Really just something that's going to help you out. If you utilize this tool, it could be the differentiator between getting a job or not. You know, they're going to look at a candidate, they're going to do an interview, they're going to see that you're, you know, serious and you're giving all the right questions. Then they go on to your social media pages and they say, you know what, this is somebody that's going to be really valuable. Look at all the content that they're producing. Look at all the stuff and the insight that they're giving on this social media page. This is exactly the kind of person we want to bring on. So it is an extension of who you are, and it is such a valuable tool that we can utilize.
No, I completely agree. And you know, there are some easy tips and tricks. Don't talk religion. Don't talk politics. Don't go on there and say Jay Cutler just blew up my Week 7 matchup, and then later on having to deal with that sports team in your work. And very good advice, Paul, as well. This is not just relating to sports stars and sports brands, but relating to the students that we have representing those companies and representing themselves on the market, and how they put themselves forward through social media is very important as well. On my social media and LinkedIn, there'll be a lot of stuff about webinars, about critical thinking, about looking at a subject and bringing theory to practice, because that'll be my brand, and the same will go for you guys. So that's really salient advice that needs to be taken by anyone who wants to be taken seriously in this industry at the moment. So we talked about sponsorships a bit earlier. We'll skim over it again, Wendy. Obviously, the financial package is going to be a big concern. You know, I'm a big fan of Tottenham Hotspurs in the UK, and we're always looking at who our new sports shirt sponsor will be and how much money they're going to bring in for us to buy players on the transfer market. But beyond money, you know, how are sponsors selected?
Like you said, the number one thing that teams are looking at is the revenue. Obviously, I'm not going to brush that aside. But just going back very quickly to our branding discussion that we started off with, and I'll just make a quick comment on this. If you're a sport organization, you should be thinking about the sponsorships that you have as little small puzzle pieces that build the picture of your overall brand. If you're not thinking about each partnership that you sign with and how their brand starts to fill in the picture of your overall brand, then you're doing it wrong. Lots of people can write you checks, and that will help you in the short term, but the clubs and the organizations that you see that have really powerful brands, it's also because their partners are really perfect fit. They have a lot of the same vision, mission, values in common, and over time, both of those brands build each other up and make each one of them, more powerful. So each sponsorship, like I said, is just a little piece that fills in the puzzle, and they should contribute to the brand image that you are trying to build and solidify. And going back to your soccer example, Joe, 2 of the biggest deals that just got renewed recently were Chevrolet and Emirates for the jersey, the kit sponsorships. Also, I've been following, they're starting to put the secondary patches on the sleeve. That's great. I realize this is all advertising inventory and you should maximize that. But that, again, is the revenue piece. And be very careful that even if it's a secondary sponsor and it's a sleeve sponsor, be careful. Do you want to put a gambling company on there? Is that really what you want to do? Does that fit your brand, or is that just for revenue? So just be very careful. If the puzzle piece doesn't fit, maybe wait a little while and find that perfect piece later.
And you can see a great example on some will call them the greatest sports team on earth, Barcelona, the football team. Who's their sponsorship for their jersey? It's Oxfam. They gave all their money and put Oxfam as the sponsor for their jersey. An incredible story, if any of you want to look into that. And what does that say about Barcelona, and what does that do for that brand? An enormous, enormous amount by putting Oxfam right there as the logo, and absolutely no corporate sponsorship whatsoever apart from the jersey, which is, I believe, is Adidas as well. So let's have a little look at the Canes branding. We've kind of looked at it throughout. There's been a lot of images that we've used. One thing I'm noticing is a lot of consistency. What do you feel, Ty, are the main key components of the Miami Hurricanes brand identity before it met Nike or Adidas or anyone else?
Yeah, one of the cool things that I respect and love about the our identity here in terms of the University of Miami, with our brand, is that where in other institutions you'll see a different brand for specific areas of the university. Here we have one brand, we have one U, and it's representative of every single thing at this university. And I certainly believe that that helps to strengthen us and our overall reputation and what people think about us. There is no deviating from it. That is what, that is what it is. And so I think that's one of the coolest thing too. And I even tell my students the color scheme. Where else are you going to find that color scheme and make it cool? Orange and green? Are you serious? We've made orange and green cool. And
Yeah.
I think there's only one other university I can think of that's actually in the state that has that color scheme. But most people don't know that. They know the University of Miami, and we've done a wonderful thing, or we've been very good in terms of continuing to develop that. And I think it also goes back to similar with the Marlins. We pay a lot of attention to detail. We have our own font, so our font is unique to the University of Miami. It's the University of Miami's font. And again, you see that represented definitely in our sport teams here at the U, but that also aids and plays a critical role in the identity of the University of Miami. So it's and the other thing, like I said earlier, we're in Coral Gables, but we're the University of Miami.
Exactly.
As cool as Coral Gables is, and this is no disrespect, Coral Gables is awesome. Most people don't know Coral Gables, they know Miami. And so that in itself also plays a nice role into strengthening our brand identity.
Exactly. I mean, whatever game you go to, whether you're going to a basketball game, whether you're watching track and field, watching American football, men or women, I assume you can do that no matter what, right?
Absolutely.
So just by doing that, all I've done is put my two fingers together like that, and I'm already conjured up everything about your brand across all of your teams. It's very, very, very difficult.
We appreciate you getting that right, Joe. Most people don't get it right.
That's a very strong
Very,
view.
very
I've been practicing throwing my U up. I've been practicing in front of the mirror, getting it right. So our last question really, as we kind of wrap up, we've got about 12, 15 minutes left. We've been discussing this throughout, so if you've been listening carefully, these are the kind of conversations that we're having in class. These are the kind of lessons that we teach through sports branding, through to sponsorship, through to how you can conduct yourself personally as a professional in this industry. I want to go back round to you, to Wendy, in terms of how does then the University of Miami U Online Masters in Sports Administration, this wonderful course that we have, how does this program prepare our professionals for this competitive landscape? And just talk a bit also about what we're seeing on the screen here, which is, a sports industry conference and things like that.
Well, since we're on a branding topic, I think it's only right for me to kind of give, I guess, our three biggest differentiators that make our online program stand out among all the other brands that you might be researching online if you're considering doing an online master's degree in sport administration. I would say first and foremost, our biggest differentiating factor is our faculty. And what I mean by that is a lot of online programs are taught by adjunct faculty or are being taught kind of behind the scenes by PhD students or assistants, other types of instructors. All of our faculty are full-time. They all have terminal degrees in their particular areas of research. All of us have worked in the industry prior to becoming academics, so we all can teach the theory and the research, but we've all had our sleeves rolled up and worked in the industry. We've all been there, so we're all firm believers in the industry, which is why our program is so practical and applied. Our second biggest differentiating factor is the level of interactivity. Boom, here we are, face-to-face, doing the webinar, getting to know our prospective students and our real students. We hold online office hours. We do all sorts of things to interact and engage with our students. So going back to what I said earlier, there will not be a difference between what you get in our campus program and what you get in our online program, even in terms of face-to-face time with us, because, you know, here we are, you're not just seeing us in ads or just on the front page of our class websites. And then the third and most important, and I'll turn it over to Professor Resnick, is you know, you get jobs in sport administration because you get access to networks. You get access to meeting people in the industry. And everyone's heard that saying, oh, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, it's both. It's what you know, it's who you know, and Professor Resnick always says very famously, it's who knows you, and that's very different. We can know a lot of people through social media and that type of thing. People are only going to know you if they meet you personally, if you volunteer, if you intern, if you are active in the industry, and that's what gets you jobs. And for our online program, we host an online orientation at the beginning of the program where you can meet all your faculty, sit down and have lunch, meet your classmates face-to-face. So we start off the program with face-to-face interaction. We just had a big U Online tailgate at our last football game where our students came and we tailgated, and we had a big event on the party deck and watched the football game together. We host a sport industry conference in the spring every year where we bring all the best industry folks to you so that you can meet them and you can come to our campus and get ready to go in the job market and be in the industry. And then we host a nice big luncheon when you come to graduate and celebrate with us. So you have the best of both worlds. You have the flexibility and the convenience of online, you have the quality of the private school education and the brand of the University of Miami, and you have all the face-to-face time that you want until you're tired of us. And then you also have Professor Resnick, who has just a wealth of experience, and he can talk about what he brings to the table in terms of all the resources you need to have access to the industry and jobs.
Yeah, and I don't want to take, you know, even a little bit of the credit, because the faculty here, we all do an amazing job with networking, and kind of our goal is to expand our brand outside of just this little circle here on campus. We're constantly networking with folks in the industry. I've got, the list just goes on and on. I talked to the New York Mets yesterday. The NBA is going to be here next week. We've got the industry conference. There isn't a week or a day that goes by that we're not connected with somebody in the industry. And it's not for us. We do it all for the students. And even if you're not here on campus, there's opportunities for you to get involved. And you know, once you're in the program, I am more than happy to chat on the phone. I do it nearly every day. I'm talking to some online students on the way to work, on the way home, and during my lunch break, you know, emailing. We are completely accessible, and I'm giving those tips, those hints on how you can do it. Even if you're in the middle of North Dakota, how do you get that experience? You're not here at the University of Miami, but there's ways to do it. And we will provide you all of the tools, and we say this all the time, to be successful. It's just a matter of if you're going to take those and run with them. We've got an amazing social media page, ties back into social media, a Facebook group page that once you've started our program, you'd have access to, and that's where we post up internships, full-time jobs, part-time gigs, volunteer positions, not only just here in Miami, all around the country. It allows you then to network with our current students, our alumni, our industry professionals. We've got almost 2,000 members on that page. It's completely interactive. Every day information is going on up there. And we also want to bring you guys back here whenever it's possible. That industry conference that we'll have in the spring is key. And the last 2 years, a large contingent of our online students have come to that. They come and then they network with a whole host of professionals. The degree is going to be great. theory is awesome. I can't say enough positive things about that, but in order to be successful in this career, you have to combine the theory and the practical side, bring them together, and then that degree on the wall is going to mean a lot more for you because you've done everything that you can to get your foot in the door, to meet the right people, have a nice, successful resume. So we're doing some amazing things here. It's not just everybody over here has a part of it, and we all do it for the students. And we want to make sure you have all these tools available to be successful. We want our students. We've got a student, former student right now, who's in the World Series. She's working with the Los Angeles Dodgers. I'm pulling for a championship ring for her. We've had champions with the Spurs and the Miami Heat and various other leagues. You know, and once you're a part of the University of Miami, you're connected to all of those people. We've all worked very hard to continue to keep our alumni connected to our on-campus and online students. You know, I've got a call, for instance, coming up today with a student that's not from down here. He's out in another part of the country. He's like, hey, how can I get involved? The beauty is I've got 5 former students that are up there. It's like, hey, by the way, you're going to reach out to this person, you're going to reach out to this person, you're going to reach out to this person, and they're all going to be accessible to them. And they're going to be able to build a nice little networking branch right there. And that's what we're constantly looking to do. It's not just only about being here on campus. We are worldwide.
Well, I think it's that scholar practitioner aspect of the course. I mean, as with all the courses at University of Miami Online, there's obviously a dedication to the theory, but then it's how do you practically apply that theory, and it's not just through tangible methods of doing that in the industry, but who are you going to meet and who are you going to be connected with as well. And that networking opportunity is absolutely expected at this level and necessary if you're going to work in sports administration at the highest level. And this program does give you the opportunity to work at that level. So thank you very, very much, Paul, for that insight as well. So we've concluded our questions for today as part of our panel slide questions that we had. We've had some more questions coming in, guys, from our audience members. We're just going to take a few of those before we continue because we've got some quite interesting questions to discuss. So let's move in to our Q&A. So I haven't looked at any of these questions, guys, because we believe in the unedited words of our students. So we're going to read them as they've been given to me. Just bear with me as I go through them now. We'll divide them up. Audience, how do you separate the Adidas success with the continued improvement and the recent successful ranking of the program? It seems there may be an effect from the program's success or recent hiring of the new coach that is driving some of the perceived branding success. Interesting. Is Miami sports team success Miami University program's success?
I would say absolutely. I don't think it's ever going to hurt at all if either side has success. So going back to what I was saying about the Adidas brand, if they're soaring, you know, business-wise and, you know, market share and in their popularity, that's going to be great for our teams to have that. And of course, Adidas is going to love when Adidas schools are winning and teams are undefeated, because all the networks are going to cover those undefeated successful teams, and not to get too much into a research or data discussion, but it's more impressions through media of their brand. So certainly for them, the more we win, the more free exposure they get, which is why they're putting their 3 stripes on our back, because they're not going to put that brand on smaller teams that aren't on camera all the time. And certainly, you know, big Power 5 schools get all the coverage, and then the ones who win get even more coverage. If you watch any, if you're a branding or sponsorship nerd like myself or any of us here, actually, when you're watching big sporting events, when you're watching the men's tournament for basketball, once you start getting down to the Sweet 16 or the Final Four, they'll actually flash up on the screen, is it 2 Nike schools versus 2 Adidas schools? So if you don't think that branding matters, they keep track of how many of this brand or that brand school make it to these championships. And so, you know, the college football playoff is coming up, and Nike gets so much exposure because Alabama wins and just consistently keeps their brand in front of the camera. That's what they're paying for. So yes, the answer to the question is it helps both sides.
Absolutely.
And that's why the two brands are partnering with each other, because if they're both successful, they're both going to reap the rewards of the relationship.
Absolutely.
Nice. I mean, even on the glove, as you grab the ball, it's right there, and you don't even notice it. It's right there. You go in for the catch, and then you're seeing the slow motion replay, and you're watching the Adidas symbol in slow motion as someone calls a touchdown. And then all those, subconscious emotions flood through and ties in with the brand. There's a lot here about, psychology as well and consumer behavior, which we might leave, guys, for another webinar where we kind of go on a bit of a deeper dive in terms of the psychological connections that these brands are making with us. We're easy targets as sports fans and sports obsessives. The wedding industry, the funeral industry, the sports industry all have the same audience, people who will spend money without thinking first. And so sports is one of those industries. Buy new jerseys.
Yeah. Thanks for the nugget. That's a good one.
That's awesome.
No, it's all the time. The wedding industry, people will buy. I mean, someone who's been married and had a child. I've got a 2-year-old child, and I will buy anything for that child without thinking first. Baby products. I won't compare them. Wedding products, you don't compare them. When you're having a funeral, you don't compare products. And it's similar when sports teams, you buy the jersey, you sign up to Game Pass or whatever, because that's your jam, that's your sports team. It's like religion. Another question here. What brand or lift advantage do you think the University of Michigan would get from the Air Jordan logo, and similarly the Ohio State University using the LeBron King James logos? So do you think other universities are getting similar lifts from such iconic logos?
Absolutely, right? Yeah, there's no question that LeBron's brand and its relationship with Ohio State football and the Jordan brand with the University of Michigan, it's exposure, right? I mean, this is earned media. It's what brands that latch on or partner with sport entities they look forward to, and the platform of sport allows that to happen. And it's even more impressive now with social media platforms, right? If I go back to the conversation where I mentioned with video, it's not just the leagues that are putting video out on their social platforms. It's also universities are doing the same thing. So the reach that now has, where you're not necessarily even, while it's important to get the media coverage, absolutely, you can now, sport organizations now, in many regards, serve as media members themselves, because they can disseminate information or content, video content in this case, as it relates to a program, a successful sport program within their sport organization. So there's no doubt that those two schools are benefiting as well. The media help, and obviously social media platforms do as well.
I mean, this has been an absolutely action-packed session. We're running slightly out of time, guys, so I'm going to ask you a last question for today, which I think is an important one and kind of summarizes our discussion today. How is branding changing, and how is sports branding changing or evolving as people's viewer habits are changing?
I think it's huge. I think the media and how it's consumed is, it's really leading the way. People are having to change how they brand based on where they're going to be able to get the exposure. So Dr. Martin, what he said before, absolutely critical right now. The streaming piece and people moving away from watching sports on their TVs kind of at set days and times to consuming that online. I think the biggest indicator of that part of the landscape changing is there are prominent teams coming out at the professional level, at the collegiate level, that are admitting that they're moving their entire traditional media budget to social and digital only, or to mobile. And so right then and there, they're telling you that they don't care where they reach you. They just matter that they've got their brand in the right place. And so that's going to be a critical piece going forward, to just you know, your brand is always going to stay the same. Like Dr. Martin said, your brand is what makes you uniquely you. It's who you are in the long term. It's your vision, mission, values. Your brand is not your product. Your product is ever changing. And so your brand is always going to be what it is. Where you place your brand is changing rapidly right now. And that's what's going to be interesting to watch, where certain teams and leagues and athletes choose to place their brand to maximize their exposure, their revenue, and their touch points with the consumer.
And watch, in my opinion, I'm excited to see what the internet companies do, as I believe the Amazon has the rights to Thursday night to stream Thursday night games. I'm excited to see what Apple, what Microsoft, what other major companies do in the way of helping sport, in the way of further branding itself in the marketplace. And those companies have money to spend. I think it was a couple of years ago I saw Google had $60 billion of liquid cash ready to go, and straight cash on me. Yeah. And they were, I'm excited, again, I'm excited to see what this looks like in the next couple of years when the internet companies really get involved, even more so than they are today.
I completely agree. It's all, it has to be mobile and flexible, has to be an omni-channel approach, and sports brands have to reach sports fans however they like receiving their sports news or watching their live games. So I completely agree with you there. This wraps up our session for today, as we've run slightly over time. It's about an action-packed session. Thank you very much, the good doctors, academic doctors of sport, Dr. Wendy Dees, thank you very much. Tywin Martin, thank you very much. Paul Resnick as well for today. You are real people that can be found actually teaching and lecturing on our fantastic sports administration course. Distance learning isn't lonely when you're studying at UOnline University of Miami. You get that access, but you get it from the comfort of where you are at the moment. Thank you very much for explaining everything. Our class starts on the 8th of January. There's an early admission deadline, so get your application in straight away to get your registration deposit waived. That's a very nice gratuity, so get your application in and we can start to look at that now. Thank you very much to our panel for today. Thank you very much to our producer in the background, Stephen, who's been fielding those questions to me. This is a University of Miami online presentation. And lastly, I'd like to thank you all for your attendance and thank my guests for their insight today. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and good evening. We'd all wish you good luck in your endeavors, but if you're paying attention and you're prepared, you won't need any luck. And thank you very much indeed.
See you January 8th, guys.
Absolutely.
Sign in.
January 8th. Bye.
Thank you all.
Right.
Go